Joining us right now on the Mattress Warehouse hotline, a guy who we had back a couple months ago when this pandemic started, is Dr. Thom A, who is the medical director for the NFL Players Association. Good morning, Doc.
What up, Junks? How's my favorite journalist?
Hello, we're doing all right.
Journalist is a stretch. You have a low bar for journalists, apparently.
Doc, we're looking forward to the return of sports, but, and I know this is not the sport where you are the doctor for, but we were talking about golf earlier where there's been a little flare-up of coronavirus cases and where that might be heading. Let's talk about the sport you're involved with, which is football. They've been having, I don't know if it's been a spike, but they've been having some players that have tested positive during these private workouts. That's something you've recommended against, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's no offense to the players, they're doing what they want to do, which is and what they love to do, which is get in shape, get ready, foam at the mouth to get back and do what they've spent their whole lives trying to do. But it just shows you that you got to have a system, and without a system, that's what happens. The measurement itself is not the measurement of value, but the ability to say this player has virus in their nasal passages. So, that's what we're hard at work on, is getting a protocol that we all agree on and that we can measure very, very carefully to say if someone does have virus, then we have to isolate them for a period of time so that they're not shedding it and spreading it. And so I can't say I'm surprised by it, but it just reiterates the hard work that we're doing and the need for that hard work to make sure that virus doesn't get transmitted. I mean, this virus has one natural enemy and one only, and that's transmission. You shut off transmission, you shut off the virus. So, my recommendation to the guys was that let's not be doing this stuff until we get a formal testing procedure in place and an ability to have a whole structure across the board.
Is there any way for you guys to monitor the percentage of players that have been testing positive and hospitalized as compared to the rest of society as a whole?
Well, the NFL, we signed a memorandum of understanding, MOU, with the league that they have to report to us, not only any player, but any staff member that tests positive. So to the extent that that has been reported, we know about those people. We don't know the individuals unless somebody, Von Miller, for example, and famously so, or Sean Payton, coach with the Saints, goes public and tells us. But the good news is that of the 30 or so that have tested positive, so far no one's had to be hospitalized. So, knock on wood, cross fingers and toes, and so far we've avoided that.
So, Doctor, how do you deal with reports of Tom Brady holding workouts in Tampa Bay and Kyler Murray apparently getting together with teammates like DeAndre Hopkins in Dallas? Do you guys, email them? Do you reach out to them and say you shouldn't be doing this? Well, what's the protocol for dealing with those guys and other players that are just trying to get ready for the upcoming season?
Well, it's a great question. First of all, it's not just technically true, but I work for them. They don't work for me. They pay me to advise them and give them the best advice. And we've got a group of serious scientists that help advise me and the players. That said, we've been clear. We have reached out to and sent an email and posted on Slack that the statement I'm sure you've seen, which is that our at best advice to them to show up at the training camps healthy and keep their families healthy is not to do that until everyone is involved in a rigorous screening and testing program. So that's still my advice. Be my advice tomorrow, unless somebody comes up with a vaccine tonight. It's still going to be my advice.
Well, here's my question. Yeah, because we were touching on this. Sorry, Jason. We were touching on this earlier, Doc. And, obviously we all want the same thing, right? We want this virus to go away. But we don't know when it's going to – we don't know if it's going to be one of these recurring things like the influenza. Nobody knows. We can hope that it's just a one-time thing and that's it. What is sort of our threshold going to be? Because I can make the argument, and I can very much back it up with data, that these younger athletes, especially, I mean, you know what? I'm a little bit in the pickle on some of these offensive linemen. I don't know if they're in the peak of health, but I assume they are. But young, healthy athletes, generally under 30 or whatever, right? They'll sail through this, generally speaking, better than influenza even. But we still allow us to play with influenza, right, Doc? So so even if we have a vaccine for this, there's still going to be, the vaccine for flu is not foolproof, right? Like, I had the flu twice. Right. What are we going to do? What is our threshold of, okay, this is acceptable risk? What's the answer
it's
to
an
that?
excellent question.
It's never going to be zero.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Yeah, it's an excellent question, and here's why. Because it is a fallacy, and no offense, but here's the fallacy, and that is, this is, as we talked before, it's a novel and emerging coronavirus. What does that mean? I mean, those aren't two words. That means we don't know.
Right.
That this is still so early. We have less than 1 year of experience with this, and so we simply do not know from the data that we have right now that the argument that, hey, you're young and healthy and you're in good shape, what we do know is that here's the risk factors for contracting the disease, here's the risk factors for having more severe disease, and here's the risk factors, while extremely low, hospitalization or even death. And those risk factors, you guys know, male, having a Y chromosome doesn't help you in this disease. African-American, Hispanic, or Pacific Islander, well, that's nearly 80% of our population. BMI greater than 28. The two Super Bowl teams, 80% of their players had BMIs greater than 28.
Wow.
And nearly 60% had BMIs over 30. Mm-hmm. Now, you get up into 40, that's even different. So you start at number one, we don't know that the statement, hey, you're young and healthy, you'll be okay, even if you get it, is true or not true. And number two, we do know, without question, that the risk factors are higher for people with those diseases. Plus, you had sleep apnea, you had hypertension, and most of our guys don't have cardiovascular disease or lung disease, although Von Miller has asthma. So he was at a higher risk factor. He did well so far. Then add this little piece and think about yourselves and think about your kids. And that is, we don't know what the long-term effects are. We don't know. There's some evidence that both pulmonary issues and cardiac issues may be a problem down the line, even in younger populations. So we've got to be really careful about that assumption.
I would argue, I appreciate and I respect, and you know more than me, and I know a lot of people are fist pumping with what you're saying. I would just argue that I think we do know a lot about this in the sense that millions and millions and millions of people, I think the data is in pretty clearly around the world that young people, we may not know the long-term effects, Doc, obviously. You can't know that. It's novel, like you say. But I think we know pretty definitively how well young people do with this. Now, you bring up the comorbidities. We can't argue that. You can't argue that. That's documented.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, it's not a technical term, but the data, and I spoke yesterday to people with the NIH and National Academy of Medicine, just to be sure I had it right. And the data has not been disaggregated, meaning taking those risk groups that we're talking about and saying, okay, you're young, but you have these risk factors. That just hasn't been disaggregated yet. And that's a major issue we got to get to.
Doc, maybe you've already answered this question, but if you did, just kind of recap it. When you talk to people in the medical field, all right, what is the one thing that doctors just don't understand about the virus? What's the number one thing that, if you can pinpoint something, that you just kind of flummoxed?
Well, it's this. And first of all, you do have, to a certain extent, dueling scientists, novel and emerging. So there's all these papers that are out there that haven't been peer-reviewed and gone through the scrutiny because of the need for speed. We, as they say in Top Gun, we have the need for speed. And no criticism of that. But what we don't know is, we know it's transmitted very quickly and efficiently, and you couldn't design a sport, an activity of any type, more designed to transmit this disease than NFL football, particularly down in the trenches. And so what we don't know is, if you've had the disease, can you get it again? Does the fact that you have antibody to the virus mean that you're immune from the virus? We just don't know that. And that's the one that, as you say, people are kind of flummoxed. We won't know that until both more science is in and until we go through the fall wave, which, by the way, that's when we play football, I think.
Well, we're not going to know that for years, I don't think. I mean, definitively, if you're talking about definitively knowing, Doc, that you're scaring me with a lot of what you're saying. I think even Tony Fauci would acknowledge that while we don't know for certain, I mean, I watched that guy as much as you, I'm sure, 9 billion times at the podium say, we don't know, but we're pretty sure that you have some level of immunity for some indefinite period of time.
And that's precisely right. Tony's
Yes.
a friend, and I worked with him back in the inhalational anthrax crisis in 2001.
Yeah.
Boy, you talk about indefatigable. I mean, that guy has energy to spare.
His energy level is insane.
And I
There's no
agree.
doubt.
Yeah, it's nuts. I agree, but if you think about what you just said, it's some immunity and some level.
Some level of it, yeah.
And that's true. Yeah, and so.
Right, but we don't have zero risk, Doc.
You know, when you get the bad form of this disease, it's a badass virus.
Understood.
And yeah.
Understood. I don't want it. Are you
But
kidding?
go back and the risk issue is, it is. There's a risk in everything. There's a risk in getting in your car and driving
Right.
around.
Right.
You know, there's a risk
Right.
in every activity that you do.
Hey, Doc, can you just
the risk is.
Yeah,
Doc,
what's
can,
the
can-
threshold?
Can you just tell Jason to wear a mask when he goes in the grocery store?
My wife won't let me in the grocery store.
No. So the story on masks, very quickly. A so-called surgical mask, the kind you see, the cloth mask that people use, that protects others from you transmitting the virus.
Right.
Only an N95, one of those, or KN95, there's two different types, only those prevent you from getting the disease.
Gotcha.
And so when you take about risk and frequency, our guys are in the trenches for 162 snaps a game, blowing into each other's. It's almost like mouth-to-mouth resuscitation in terms of spreading oral secretions and therefore the virus. So that's where our
Doc,
risk multiplies.
The picture that you paint, I know we got a break. They're yelling at us. The picture that you paint, if they listen to your advice, I'm going to guess you would suggest no football.
No, I think we have to make it as safe as we possibly can. And that's all we can do. And then let's see how the virus transmits. So, no, we are optimistic we'll get the season open. We don't know how long it will last.
He just doesn't want any of the extras like these voluntary workouts. Thank you, Doc.
No worries.
Yeah,
Good
thank
talking to
you.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Thom A, the NFLPA medical director.